Chapter 1 Rebirth. Annie Liu woke up to a splitting headache and the bitter taste of alcohol still lingering on her tongue. The ceiling above her was familiar. Too familiar. Smooth, white, untouched by the wear and tear of the years she remembered living through. Her body felt light, but her chest was unbearably tight, like she was missing something or maybe everything. She sat up slowly. Her hands trembled as they reached for the edge of the bed, the silky sheets falling away to reveal the pale, unblemished skin of her arms, young, unscarred, untouched by time. Her heart thundered in her chest. This can't be. She scrambled for her phone on the bedside table. The screen flickered to life. The date read, March 18, 2023. Her breath caught in her throat. She was 25 again. But she remembered everything. The chill of the hospital bed after the car crash. The indifference in Daniel's eyes as he signed the death certificate. The blank expression on her son's face at her funeral. Not even a tear. The image carved itself deep into her heart. And worse, 2 months after her death, Daniel had married her. His first love. The one he never stopped loving. The woman she had silently competed with all her life without ever standing a chance. And her son, her only child who she thought would grieve her, had instead smiled beside his new stepmother. He had called her Mom. Annie felt like she couldn't breathe. She swung her legs over the bed and stared at the room around her. The expensive furnishings, the immaculate furniture, the cold perfection of the penthouse Daniel had purchased for her after their marriage. A gilded cage. Memories of their wedding flashed through her mind. The excitement she had felt. The quiet disappointment when he hadn't even looked at her during the ceremony. Their marriage had been arranged, a merger of 2 wealthy families. But Annie had loved him since university. She had thought, foolishly, that time and care would thaw his heart. It hadn't. She had spent 3 years trying to make him love her. And in the end she died alone. But not this time. Her hands clenched into fists. This time she would not waste her second chance begging for affection from a man who never wanted her. She would not die crying over someone who had already moved on. She wouldn't let history repeat itself. A knock sounded on the bedroom door. "Madam, breakfast is ready," the housekeeper's voice said politely from the other side. Annie blinked, trying to compose herself. "Thank you, Auntie May. I'll be down in a moment." Her voice sounded steady. Too steady. She wasn't steady. Inside she was burning. She showered quickly and changed into a light dress, tying her hair into a simple bun. As she stared at her reflection in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman looking back. This was her from 3 years ago. So young. So naive. Not anymore. By the time she reached the dining room, Daniel was already seated, browsing through his tablet. He looked like he always did, cold, refined, distant. A perfectly sculpted mask. "Morning," she said, forcing a smile. He didn't look up. "Morning." The casual indifference hit her like a slap, even though she knew it was coming. "Are you still working on the Li-Tech acquisition?" she asked, sitting down across from him. He paused for a fraction of a second, eyes flicking toward her before returning to the screen. "Yes." She smiled faintly. That acquisition had gone through successfully in her previous life. It had made Daniel's company one of the top 3 tech conglomerates in Asia. He would become a business legend. But none of it had made him happy. He still didn't love her. "Daniel," she said quietly. He looked up at her now, brows slightly raised. "Yes." Her heart pounded. But she didn't let herself hesitate. "I want a divorce." The fork in his hand froze mid-air. He set it down carefully. "Come again." "I want a divorce," she repeated, this time more clearly. His expression didn't change, but something in the air did. "This again?" he asked mildly. "You threw a tantrum last month because I missed dinner. What is it this time?" "I'm not throwing a tantrum," she said, her voice calm. "I'm serious. I don't want to be in this marriage anymore." Silence. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with unreadable eyes. "Since when did you grow a spine?" "Since I died." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" Annie smiled gently. "Nothing. Just a bad dream." Daniel stared at her a moment longer, then returned to his tablet as if the conversation never happened. We're not getting a divorce. If you're upset, I suggest you go shopping. Buy whatever makes you feel better. Annie's heart cracked a little more, but she didn't let it show. She stood. You'll change your mind soon enough. You don't love me. You never did. She didn't wait for a reply. As she walked away, her phone buzzed. A notification. A photo from the school app. Her son's class had a parent-child activity scheduled for next week. Her fingers trembled as she opened the image. There he was. Her little boy. 5 years old. Bright eyes, a bit too serious for his age. In her past life, she'd been so obsessed with gaining Daniel's love that she'd overlooked how distant she had grown from her own child. She had always thought there would be time to fix it. There hadn't been. This time she would be different. This time she would be his mother. A real one. And she would live, not just survive, not just exist in Daniel Lee's shadow. She would live fully, even if it meant walking away from everything she once thought she wanted. She stared out the window at the city skyline and whispered to herself, I'm going to change everything. Chapter 2. Confronting Daniel. It had only been 2 days since Annie woke up in her 25-year-old body. 2 days of pretending. Pretending she wasn't screaming inside. Pretending to smile at Daniel's icy silence. Pretending to eat breakfast while her appetite vanished with every hollow conversation. But today she wouldn't pretend anymore. She stood outside Daniel's private study, hands clenched at her sides. The dark oak doors loomed before her, closed tight like the man behind them. She took a deep breath and knocked. Come in, came his voice, flat and even. She pushed open the door. Daniel sat behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear, a tablet glowing in front of him. His custom suit fit him perfectly, every inch the cold, calculating CEO the business world revered. His black eyes flicked to her briefly, then back to his screen. 5% over the asking price. If they don't budge, we walk, he said into the phone. Yes. I'll send the final offer by noon. Annie waited until he ended the call and set the phone down. He didn't look up. She walked forward, the soft tap of her heels the only sound in the vast room. She stopped in front of his desk and stared at him. I want to talk, she said quietly. He leaned back in his chair, finally meeting her gaze. Another tantrum? No. A decision. A beat passed. His brow lifted just slightly. Annie inhaled slowly, steadying herself. I meant what I said the other morning. I want a divorce. Pause. Daniel blinked once. You're serious? She nodded. He stood, walked around the desk, and leaned casually against the edge, arms folded. Why now? Because I didn't hold your hand at dinner? Or because I forgot your birthday again? There's no point in staying in this marriage, Daniel. We're not happy. We never were. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. You weren't saying that when you begged our families to approve the marriage. Annie flinched. Yes, I was foolish. I thought loving you was enough. I thought you'd eventually see me. He didn't respond. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. I remember everything, Daniel, she said, her voice softer now. 3 years from now, I'll die in a car crash. And you'll be fine. You'll marry the woman you've always loved. My son will call her Mom. Daniel's jaw tightened. What are you talking about? I don't expect you to believe me, she said. Just understand this. I won't wait around for the end this time. I'm not going to die as your discarded wife. I'm going to live. With or without your approval. His eyes searched hers for something. Weakness, hesitation, maybe even a hint of her old self. But she gave him nothing. Just the truth. I don't agree to a divorce, he said finally. You're overthinking again. Go rest. This phase will pass. She laughed. It startled even her. Of course you won't agree. You don't want the inconvenience of it. But I'm not asking for your permission, Daniel. I'm telling you what I've decided. Daniel's expression darkened. And our son? You'll abandon him too? Annie's heart clenched. I'm not abandoning him, she said. I love him. More than I ever showed in the past. I want to be a real mother to him. Then why are you leaving? Because staying here means living as a ghost in your house. A stranger to him. He's already drifting away from me. She turned, not waiting for his reply. Her steps were quick, but inside she was unraveling. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and the weight of everything she hadn't said pressed down on her. She found her son in the sunroom, seated cross-legged on the floor, building a tower of magnetic tiles. His small face was furrowed in concentration. "Baby," she said gently, kneeling beside him. "Can I talk to you?" He looked up with his father's eyes. Pause. "Yes." Annie swallowed hard. "Mommy's going away for a little while. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere peaceful." He stared at her, unmoved. "I'd like you to come with me." He frowned. "I don't want to go." "Why not?" she asked, trying to keep her voice even. "I want to stay with Daddy," he said. "He lets me go to soccer and has ice cream in the freezer. And Grandma comes every Saturday." Annie felt something twist inside her. "You can have all of that with me too. We'll have our own ice cream. I'll play soccer with you." He shook his head. "I don't want to." Tears burned in her throat, but she blinked them away. "I understand," she said softly. "It's okay." He turned back to his tiles, already forgetting the conversation. Annie stood slowly. Her heart felt heavier than it had in years. She had loved Daniel for so long that she forgot what it felt like to love herself. And in doing so she had overlooked the one person who needed her most, her son. But she wouldn't make that mistake again. If he wouldn't come with her now, she would become someone he wanted to come back to one day. She walked away from the room, from the house, and eventually from the city, leaving behind everything she once thought she couldn't live without. She packed lightly, told no one but her parents where she was going, and by sundown she was on the train to the countryside. A new life was waiting for her. She didn't know if she'd find happiness, but she would find herself. Chapter 3. A New Life Begins. The countryside greeted Annie Liu with the scent of wet earth, the hum of cicadas, and a breeze that didn't reek of exhaust and ambition. She stepped off the train with a small suitcase and no idea what tomorrow would look like. But for the first time in years she wasn't afraid. The air was fresh, untouched by the city's heavy pressure. Her phone signal flickered in and out as if the universe itself was asking her to disconnect, slow down and breathe. She made her way to Willow Inn, the small hostel her maternal grandparents had built decades ago. It sat nestled between rolling hills and a crystal-clear stream, its architecture traditional but welcoming, wooden beams, curved rooftops hanging red lanterns swaying in the wind. "Miss Liu?" An elderly woman called from the gate. Annie turned to see Grandma Jiahao, the longtime caretaker of the hostel. Her back was a little hunched now and her hair had thinned, but her warm eyes hadn't changed. "You've grown so beautiful," she said, reaching out to hug Annie. "I never thought you'd come back." "I didn't either," Annie replied softly, her voice thick with emotion. They walked together up the stone path to the inn. It was smaller than she remembered, for guest rooms, a central courtyard, a tea house on the side, but it felt like sanctuary. A place untouched by her past life, untainted by Daniel's cold presence or the shadows of a love that never bloomed. "Everything's still standing," Grandma Jiahao said proudly. "We've had a few tourists pass through over the years. Nature lovers mostly. Backpackers." Annie smiled. "I think I'd like to take over the inn. Run it myself." Grandma Jiahao raised a brow. "You? A city girl? I need something that's mine. Something I can build with my own hands." The old woman didn't argue. Instead she smiled and patted Annie's shoulder. "Then you'd better learn to scrub floors and cook for 20 with just a clay stove." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustment. Annie rose at dawn to sweep the courtyard and wipe down the wooden balconies. She helped with meal prep, booking reservations, fixing squeaky doors, learning how to unclog old pipes. Her manicured hands blistered. Her back ached. And yet, She slept better than she ever had. Her mind, once cluttered with luxury brand catalogs, boardroom schedules, and social obligations, now found joy in simpler things. Grinding soybeans for fresh tofu, pressing herbal teas for guests, and sketching renovation plans in the afternoon sun. One evening, while wiping down a dusty table in the tea house, she overheard a young couple laughing in the courtyard. "Did you see the owner?" the woman whispered. "She's so elegant, like someone out of a movie." "I heard she used to be a CEO's wife," the man replied. "Came here to heal or something." Annie smiled to herself. She wasn't running away anymore. She was building something. One morning, a guest named Mina, a travel vlogger, asked Annie if she could film her making dumplings in the traditional clay kitchen. "It's just for a short clip," Mina insisted. "My followers love local culture." "Your in is so charming." Annie hesitated. She wasn't used to being in front of a camera anymore. In her old life, she was always poised beside Daniel, smiling, polished, presentable. But this was different. This was her. "All right," she agreed. "But only if you help me clean afterward." Mina's video, a short but beautifully edited clip titled, "The Countryside Inn with a Heart," went viral within days. Thousands of comments poured in. "She's like a real-life drama character. That place looks magical. I want to go. Wait, is this the ex-wife of Daniel Lee?" Annie's face turned pale at that last one. The internet was faster than wildfire. But instead of panic, she found herself laughing. Let them talk. Let the world know she was no longer Daniel Lee's wife. She was Annie Liu, the woman who ran Willow Inn. As weeks turned into months, more tourists arrived. Avid fans of her quiet charisma begged her to do live streams. Locals came to her for advice on hosting, decor, even matchmaking events. Lu Jia, they called her affectionately. Big Sister Lu. She had become something she never imagined. A woman admired not for who she married but for who she was. One night, after hosting a small outdoor concert for guests, Annie sat under the stars, sipping tea with Grandma Jiahao. "You look lighter now," the old woman said. "Like someone who finally put down a heavy stone." "I think I did," Annie replied. "It took dying once to finally start living." The old woman chuckled. "That's very poetic of you." Annie glanced up at the stars. "Do you think my son will ever forgive me for leaving? He's still young. But the heart remembers warmth. Keep building that warmth and one day he'll find his way to you." Annie smiled, blinking back tears. For the first time in both her lives, she believed that might actually be true. Chapter 4. A glimpse of the future. The morning mist clung to the hills like a silken shawl. Annie Liu stood on the wooden balcony of Willow Inn, a steaming cup of chrysanthemum tea warming her hands. Below her, guests were starting to rise, some practicing Tai Chi, others stretching sleepily in the courtyard. It was peaceful. For once, her mornings weren't drowned in the buzz of city traffic or the sterile quiet of a luxury penthouse. Here, the birds chirped without permission and the sun rose without apology. She had fallen into a rhythm, an unhurried life stitched together with kindness, purpose, and simplicity. But the past had a cruel way of finding you even when you tried to bury it. That afternoon, while sorting invoices at the reception desk, a notification popped up on her phone. Trending. CEO Daniel Lee spotted vacationing in Santorini with rumored fiancé. Her fingers froze. Against her better judgment, she clicked the link. There he was, Daniel, standing on a sunlit balcony by the Aegean Sea. Dressed in his usual tailored suit, one hand resting lightly on the waist of the woman beside him. Bartine. The woman he had always loved. Her hair was still curled perfectly, her smile bright and gentle. The same woman who, in Annie's previous life, had become Daniel's wife after her death. Sources say the two are expected to announce their engagement later this year. The CEO has reportedly become a devoted stepmother to his young son. Annie's breath caught in her throat. There was a photo, her son holding Lara's hand. Smiling. smiling in a way he had never smiled at her. Her chest constricted. Even knowing this was how it had unfolded before didn't make the ache any less sharp. Her son's trust, his warmth. It had been given so freely to another woman. A woman who had never fought for him. Never carried him for 9 months. Never tucked him in at night with a lullaby through tears. She dropped the phone onto the desk and sank into the nearest chair, wrapping her arms around herself. She had made the right decision to leave. But the right choice wasn't always the painless one. That night she didn't sleep. She lay beneath her mosquito net, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. She had left to change her fate, but no matter how far she ran, the timeline seemed to echo the same ending. Her son slipping from her grasp, Daniel moving on as though she had never existed. But she refused to let history write over her again. The next morning, without telling anyone, she boarded a train back to the city. She stood before the familiar glass and steel building of Li Group headquarters, her reflection faint in the tall windows. Her heart thundered in her chest, but she didn't flinch. The receptionist blinked in surprise. "Mrs. Li." "Just Annie Liu," she corrected with a soft smile. "Is Daniel in?" "He's in his study. But he's in a meeting." Annie didn't wait. She walked straight to the executive elevator, punched in the familiar code and rode up without pause. The doors opened with a quiet chime. Daniel's study was just as she remembered it. Sleek, cold, minimalistic. Black leather, polished steel, glass walls overlooking the city like a throne room in the sky. He looked up as she walked in. Shock flickered in his eyes, then faded into mild annoyance. "You're back." "I saw the article," she said, closing the door behind her. "You and Laura. The engagement. My son." He leaned back in his chair. "So, that's none of your concern anymore. You left." Her voice was steady. "And now I'm here. Not to come back, but to make something clear." She walked to his desk and stood there, proud, unshaken. "I want a divorce. This time legally. Officially. I don't care what our families say. I don't care what your lawyers threaten. I'm not your wife, Daniel, not anymore. Not in name. Not in heart." Daniel's jaw clenched. "You came all this way just to make a scene?" "No," she said calmly. "I came because I won't be erased." He stood. "You were the one who ran away. You left your son." Annie's voice cracked. "I left because staying was worse. Because he deserves a mother who's whole, not one broken from loving a man who never once looked at her." Daniel flinched. Annie steadied herself, then turned to leave. But at the door she paused. "One more thing." She looked at him over her shoulder. "Tell Lara, congratulations. I hope this time you can finally love without guilt." Then she was gone. That night, back at Willow Inn, she lit incense by the small shrine in her room and knelt quietly. "I gave everything to them in my first life," she whispered to the still air. "Now I'm giving everything to myself." Her phone buzzed. It was a comment on her latest live stream. "You remind me of my mom. He passed away last year. Watching you makes me feel like she's still with me." Annie smiled through tears. She hadn't lost everything. She had found something else, something real, something that belonged only to her. And she would protect it. Chapter 5. A bitter separation. The divorce papers were neatly stacked on Annie's desk. Her name sat printed at the bottom in elegant black ink. She stared at it for a long time, fingers lightly brushing the edge of the final page. It had taken weeks of back and forth cold calls between lawyers, veiled threats from both sides of the family. Her father had been furious. Her mother begged her to reconsider. But Annie had remained firm. This wasn't revenge. This was freedom. She had chosen this life. The life without Daniel Li. Still, her hands trembled slightly as she placed the papers into an envelope and sealed it. Once she sent this, it was done. 3 days later, Daniel arrived at Willow Inn unannounced. It was raining, of course it was. As if the sky itself understood the kind of day this would be. Annie opened the door to find him standing there in a perfectly tailored coat, soaked at the edges. Raindrops clung to his hair, dripping down his face. She blinked at him in surprise. "Daniel. You didn't return my calls." I didn't realize I owed you any answers. He ignored the jab. You sent the papers. Yes. His eyes searched her face, perhaps looking for a trace of regret, fear, or hesitation. He found none. Are you really going through with this? He asked, stepping inside without invitation. Annie didn't stop him. She turned and walked back toward the kitchen, the scent of ginger and spring onions filling the air. Grandma Jiahao had just finished preparing steamed buns for the afternoon guests. I thought you'd be happier, Annie said over her shoulder. You always hated being married to me. I didn't hate it, he replied quietly. I didn't love it. But I didn't hate it. Annie laughed softly. What a generous memory you have. He followed her into the warm kitchen, eyes scanning the rustic clay stove, the rows of teacups on open shelves, the dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. You really live here, he said almost in disbelief. I do, she said, turning to him. And I'm happy. Daniel's brows drew together, his voice low. With strangers, tourists, this tiny place. With people who see me, she replied. Silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folder. The papers inside were pristine, crisp. His signature glared from the bottom line. She took the folder slowly. I'll have the court finalize it next week, he said. You'll get your freedom. Annie nodded. Thank you. As he turned to leave, she hesitated. Daniel. He paused in the doorway back to her. She looked at him, not with love or longing but with clear, quiet sadness. Do you ever regret it? Us. A long pause. I regret not trying harder, he said without turning around. You loved me too loudly. And I was too quiet to answer. And then he left. Later that night, Annie sat alone by the stream behind the inn, watching the water slip gently over stones. She should have felt closure. Peace. Triumph even. But all she felt was quiet. A quiet unlike the stormy silence she'd endured in her marriage. A quiet that came with healing, not hurting. For so long she had tried to bend herself to fit Daniel's life. His world. His heart. But maybe some hearts weren't meant to open for you no matter how long you waited at the door. She placed a lantern into the water, lit with a small candle and let it drift away with the current. Goodbye, Daniel Lee. Goodbye, Annie Lee. He was just Annie Liu again. The next morning she posted a live stream as usual. But this time she didn't cook or walk through the inn. She just sat in the garden, camera gently facing her. To everyone watching, she said with a soft smile, today I did something hard. I let go of a life I thought I couldn't live without. I chose myself. The chat filled with hearts and supportive comments. Proud of you. You inspire me so much. Sometimes goodbye is the bravest thing. One comment stood out. You're shining, Liu Jia. And it's beautiful. Annie smiled at the screen. She was shining. And for the first time, it had nothing to do with being anyone's wife. Chapter 6. A Visit from the Past. The morning sun filtered gently through the peach trees, casting golden light across the courtyard. Willow Inn buzzed softly with life, guests chatting over breakfast, birds flitting through branches, a kettle hissing on the stove. Annie Liu was folding fresh linens in the laundry room when she heard the soft rumble of a car engine outside. That was unusual. Most visitors arrived by shuttle or on foot. Curious, she walked out to the front path, wiping her hands on her apron. A sleek black sedan had pulled up at the gate. The door opened and out stepped a man in a tailored suit, neat, precise, familiar. Evan Wu, Daniel's longtime personal assistant. He adjusted his glasses and gave Annie a polite nod. Miss Liu. Her heart skipped. She hadn't seen anyone from Daniel's world since the divorce was finalized 2 weeks ago. Before she could speak, the back door of the car opened again. A small boy stepped out, clinging to a plush dinosaur. Her breath caught. Jiahao. Her son looked up at her. He was taller now, just a little. His cheeks were fuller. His expression, however, remained serious. Too serious for a child his age. Annie dropped to her knees on instinct. Hi, baby, she whispered. You came. Jiahao didn't move toward her. He held the dinosaur close to his chest like a shield. "We're only here for the afternoon," Evan said gently. "Your ex-husband, Mr. Lee, asked me to bring your son. He thought it was time." "Time?" Annie echoed, standing up. "Time for what?" Evan hesitated, then handed her a sealed envelope. Daniel didn't want to write a letter. But he wrote this. "For you." She took it without opening it. Her eyes stayed locked on Jiahao, who was now eyeing the wooden beams of the inn, curious despite himself. "Would you like to see the garden?" she asked him softly. "There's a pond. With frogs." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he gave the smallest nod. They walked side by side through the winding garden paths. Jiahao didn't speak much. He trailed behind her, sometimes darting off to inspect a flower, a bug, or a flat stone near the stream. Annie didn't press him. Instead she talked, softly, gently, about the frogs, the herbs growing in the shade, the peach blossoms that would bloom in spring. She didn't ask about school or his father. She just gave him space to be a child. After nearly an hour they reached the edge of the stream. Annie sat on a stone bench and Jiahao plopped onto the grass. He looked at her for a long moment, his brows furrowed. "Why did you leave me?" he asked. Annie froze. "Not, why did you leave Dad? Not, why did you go? But you left me." Tears prickled her eyes. She swallowed hard and answered honestly. "I thought, if I stayed I would disappear a little more every day," she said. "I didn't want to be someone who was always sad. I didn't want you to grow up thinking that's what a mother looks like. But you didn't say goodbye." "I was scared," she admitted. "I thought maybe you didn't need me anymore." Jiahao frowned. "I didn't like when you left. But Dad said you were finding something." "Finding you?" Annie blinked. "He said that." The boy nodded. "He said you were trying to be happy. And that maybe one day I'd understand." Her heart ached in the best and worst way. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small wooden frog she'd carved herself, a gift she had hoped she'd someday give him. "Would you like this?" she asked. He hesitated, then took it slowly. His fingers wrapped around it. Tight. He didn't say anything else. But he didn't let go of her hand when they walked back to the inn. Later that afternoon, as Evan prepared to drive them back, Annie knelt beside the car to buckle Jiahao into his seat. "Can I come again?" he asked quietly. Annie smiled, eyes wet. "Anytime you want. This place is always your home." He nodded, hugging the wooden frog tightly to his chest. Evan lingered for a moment as she closed the door. "You're doing well here," he said. "I didn't believe it when I saw the live streams. But seeing it in person, I get it now." Annie gave him a faint smile. "Thank you." He hesitated. "He watches them, you know. Daniel." Annie's breath caught. Evan continued, voice low. "He won't admit it. But I've caught him pausing meetings to finish your cooking videos. The one with the dumplings, he made our office chef try it last week." She didn't know what to say. Evan gave a nod, got into the car and drove off down the gravel path. Annie stood there long after they were gone, the wind tugging gently at her sleeves. Something had shifted. Her son had seen her, really seen her. And Daniel was watching her from afar. She wasn't sure what that meant yet. But she knew one thing for certain. This time she wouldn't chase the past. She would keep walking forward. And if anyone came looking, she'd be waiting. Chapter 7. When Regret Knocks. Annie was in the middle of chopping scallions for a lunch special when she heard the bell above the inn's gate chime. She wiped her hands on her apron, expecting a couple of regular guests or perhaps a local vendor dropping off fresh eggs. Glad she saw him. Daniel Lee. Standing beneath the peach trees, dressed far too formally for the countryside, but not as sharp-edged as she remembered. His hair was slightly tousled. There were shadows beneath his eyes. And for once he looked like he didn't have all the answers. She stepped out into the courtyard slowly, uncertain. "Daniel." He looked up, eyes meeting hers. Not calculating. Not cold. Just tired. And, somehow, human. "I came to talk," he said, voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. Annie said nothing, just opened the door wider and motioned for him to enter. They sat in the tea house, her usual spot for guests needing warmth and privacy. She poured him a cup of chrysanthemum tea without asking. He didn't speak at first. Just watched her hands move, pouring the golden liquid with practiced grace. "You've changed," he said finally. "I had to," she replied. He nodded slowly, taking in the wooden beams above, the tiny potted herbs on the windowsill, the way the sunlight touched her face like it belonged there. "I watched your live stream," he admitted. "The one with the mooncakes. You smiled so much, it didn't look forced." It wasn't. He looked down at his cup. Jiahao's still carrying that little frog everywhere. Annie's lips curved into a small smile. "Good. I was worried he'd forget about it the minute he left." "He didn't," Daniel said. Then after a pause, "He didn't forget you either." Something shifted in the air between them. Daniel leaned back slightly, fingers curling around the warm ceramic. "You're probably wondering why I'm here," he said. "The truth is, I'm not entirely sure." "Then I'll ask," she said softly. "Is Lara with you?" His eyes flickered just for a moment. "No. I ended it." Annie's brows lifted in surprise. "You ended it?" Daniel nodded. "It wasn't what I thought it would be. Maybe it never was. Or maybe I just started seeing things differently." Silence settled between them. "I used to think love was loyalty to the person who fits your plan," he continued. "But that's not love. That's just strategy." He looked at her then, really looked. "And maybe I never gave us a real chance because I was too busy chasing the version of life I thought I wanted." Annie met his gaze evenly. "Do you regret it?" He hesitated. "I regret not learning how to love you sooner. I regret making you feel like a stranger in your own marriage." She nodded slowly, heart steady. "Daniel, I didn't need grand gestures. I needed you to be kind. To notice. To see me." "I see you now," he said quietly. "But it's too late," she replied gently, not with bitterness but clarity. "This version of me, she belongs here. And she's not waiting anymore." Daniel's jaw tightened, then relaxed. He nodded. "I didn't come here to win you back," he said. "I came because I needed to know why my son looks up to you now in a way he never did before. I needed to see what you became after I let you go." He stood then, brushing invisible dust from his coat. "You built something beautiful here, Annie. I hope you know that." She rose with him, following him to the courtyard. Just as he reached the gate, he turned to her once more. "If you ever need anything, or if Jiahao wants to come again." She smiled faintly. "I'll let you know." Daniel nodded, gave her one last look and left. That evening Annie stood alone beneath the peach trees. The breeze stirred the branches above, petals drifting down around her like quiet blessings. Daniel was finally looking in the right direction. But she was no longer standing there waiting to be seen. She was walking her own path now, one step at a time, one sunrise after the next. She had become someone even she admired. And that was worth more than any apology. Chapter 8. Reunion and Recognition. The late summer sun bathed Willow in soft amber light, and cicadas buzzed lazily in the trees. Annie was trimming the flowering herbs in the garden when she heard the sound of hurried footsteps on the stone path. She looked up, expecting a local child chasing a chicken or a tourist rushing back from a hike. Instead, her breath caught. Jiahao. This time there was no black car. No assistant. No hesitation. Just her son, backpack slung over one shoulder, dust on his shoes and a shy but determined look in his eyes. "Jiahao?" she asked, stunned. "What? How did you?" "I told Dad I wanted to come," he said simply. "By myself." Annie dropped the shears and ran to him, wrapping her arms around his small frame. He didn't pull away. That evening, Annie prepared all of Jiahao's favorites: steamed fish, egg drop soup, and crispy lotus root chips. He sat at the kitchen table, his legs swinging back and forth, watching her move with quiet interest. "You don't have chefs here?" he asked. She laughed. "No chefs. Just me and Grandma Zhao. Sometimes guests help with dishes if they stay more than 2 days." Jiahao grinned. "That's weird." "It's peaceful," she replied, placing a bowl in front of him. "Try the soup. I used fresh ginger from the garden." He sipped it, then gave a thoughtful nod. It's good. Better than our housekeepers. Annie sat across from him, trying not to cry at how casual he sounded. Like this was normal. Like they'd done it 100 times. Maybe they would. Over the next few days, Jiahao made himself at home. He helped guests carry their bags, fed the koi in the pond, and insisted on learning how to knead dough for mantou buns. At night, he and Annie would sit on the porch and count stars until he fell asleep on her shoulder. On the third day, as they were walking along the riverbank, he finally asked, "Why didn't you come back before?" Annie crouched beside him, watching the water rush over stones. "I didn't think I'd be welcome," she said. "I thought you'd be happier without me." He was quiet for a while, then mumbled, "I wasn't." Her heart broke and healed at the same time. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He looked at her, eyes serious in the way only children's eyes could be. "Promise you won't leave again?" Annie held out her pinky. "I promise. Even if you go back to Dad's, even if I'm here and you're there, I'll always be your mom. No matter where you are." He hooked his pinky with hers and gave a firm nod. That night, she received a message on her phone. "Daniel Lee, thank you for letting him stay. He's happier than I've seen him in months. Let me know if you need anything." Annie read the message twice. Then, for the first time since their separation, she replied, "Annie Liu, he belongs with people who make him feel loved. Whether that's me, you, or both of us, it's not about the past anymore. It's about what he needs now." Daniel understood. "And thank you for giving me space to realize that." She stared at the last message for a long moment, then turned off her phone and went to check on Jiahao, now asleep with the carved frog tucked beside him. The next morning, Jiahao joined Annie during her live stream. She introduced him shyly, expecting him to wave and hide behind her. Instead, he grinned at the camera and said, "This is my mom's in. She's the best cook ever." The live stream exploded with comments. "He's so adorable. Mother and son goals loudly crying face. Lu Jie is glowing." As the camera rolled, Annie laughed, her hand resting gently on Jiahao's shoulder. She had once died at 28 with a cold marriage and a broken heart. Now she was 30, reborn, and beginning again with love that finally found its voice. And it started with him. Chapter 9. A New Beginning. The first snow came early that year. Soft flurries floated down over Willow Inn, blanketing the stone pathways and peach trees in a quiet hush. Inside, the hearth was crackling, the scent of cinnamon tea warming the air. Annie Liu stood in the kitchen, kneading dough with confident, gentle hands. Outside the window, Jiahao chased two local kids across the snowy courtyard, bundled in an oversized red scarf she had knitted herself. It was peaceful. And it was enough. Since the summer, the inn had flourished. Word of her story had spread. Tourists came not just for the countryside charm, but to meet Annie Liu, the woman who'd left behind the city's cold glamour for warm kitchens, open skies, and real love. She'd gained a modest but loyal following online. People tuned in daily to see her cooking, hear her stories, and occasionally watch Jiahao sneak in and steal food off the plate before it was served. The locals had dubbed her Lu Jia, Big Sister Annie. They brought her vegetables from their gardens, baskets of eggs, and news from the village square. It was everything she had never known she needed. That afternoon, as she was arranging a set of hand-painted teacups in the gift shop, she heard a knock on the front door. When she opened it, Daniel stood there. Not in a suit this time. He wore a charcoal sweater, black jeans, and a wool coat dusted with snow. In his hands was a wrapped box and a tin of her favorite osmanthus tea. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she replied, surprised but not startled. "Come in, it's freezing." He stepped inside, taking in the cozy warmth of the inn. "I brought something," he said, handing her the box. "Jiahao's idea, but I helped." She unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a hand-drawn calendar, each month illustrated by Jiahao. Stick figures, trees, frogs, and in December, a drawing of the three of them sitting by a fireplace. Annie's eyes shimmered. "He insisted it be a family calendar," Daniel said quietly. "Said he wanted you to hang it in the tea room so everyone could see how cool his mom is." She laughed through the tears. "I'm honored." There was a pause, soft and weightless. "I didn't just come because of him," Daniel said more gently now. I came to say, thank you. For what you gave me. And for what you took back. Annie tilted her head. You're not angry anymore? No, he said. Not anymore. You showed me what life could be when it's lived for the right reasons. I never did that before. You gave our son something I never could. Warmth. Openness. A version of love that isn't wrapped in silence. She smiled faintly. And you've changed too. I had to, he echoed. There was a long, thoughtful silence. Not painful. Not awkward. Just two people letting go of who they used to be. That night they shared dinner together, just the three of them. Daniel helped clean up. Jiahao told stories from school. Annie laughed more than she had in years. Later, as the snow piled outside and the fire dimmed, Daniel stood by the door, scarf in hand. I'll head back in the morning, he said. But, if it's all right with you, I'd like to visit more. Not just for Jiahao, but to learn how to be part of something that matters. Annie studied him carefully. The sincerity, the softness in his voice. She nodded. We're not what we were, Daniel. But we could be something better. As parents. As people who grew up a little too late. He smiled. That's more than I hoped for. And this time when he walked out the door, it wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something new. The next morning, Annie streamed a video from the porch, snowflakes drifting lazily behind her. She held the calendar up to the camera, pointing to the childlike doodle of her and Jiahao holding hands. This, she said, smiling, is what a second chance looks like. The comments flooded in. This journey was beautiful, loudly crying face. From heartbreak to healing. Thank you for sharing your light. Lu Jia, you deserve all the happiness in the world. She ended the live stream, set the phone down and stepped outside. Jiahao was already building a snow fort. And Annie Liu? She was already building something stronger. A life made of her own choices. A home filled with joy. And a heart finally at peace. Extra. The moment of realization. The morning light streamed softly into the room, casting a warm glow over Daniel Li's face as he woke up. The world was still quiet, the sounds of the city just beginning to stir. But as his eyes opened, the weight of the night before hit him. He had dreamt of her again. And the dream, it wasn't like the others. This one was different. It was real. It was that day. The day she asked for a divorce. The memory flooded back to him in vivid detail. It had been a crisp autumn morning, the last time he'd seen her in their shared home. The crisp air had matched the chill between them, the silence almost unbearable after months of growing distance. The paperwork had been laid out on the table, Annie sitting across from him, her hands trembling slightly as she set the documents down. I want a divorce, she had said, her voice steady, but her eyes filled with sadness he had ignored. He had been taken aback, stunned. But the words he said next still burned in his chest. No, he had responded. You're being impulsive. This is just a phase, Annie. We can fix it. Her eyes had searched his face for something. Anything. A sign that he was willing to fight for them. But there was nothing. Only coldness. I'm not happy, Daniel, she had said softly. I haven't been for a long time. And that was when he should have fought. He should have held her. Told her how much he needed her. Told her that he had always loved her, even when he didn't know how to show it. But instead he had said, you're just overreacting. We'll get past this. You'll see. She had shaken her head, standing up slowly. I've waited too long for things to change, Daniel. But I can't keep pretending. I'm leaving. And with that she had walked out of their life. Daniel's chest tightened as he lay in bed, the weight of that moment crashing down on him. It wasn't just the divorce. It was how little he had fought. How little he had cared. He had assumed Annie would just come back, that she would always be there. But she hadn't. And now she was gone. And it was all his fault. The days after she left had been a blur of numbness. At first he'd been angry. Angry that she'd given up on their marriage without a fight. But deep down there had been this gnawing feeling. A feeling he couldn't escape, that he had let her slip through his fingers. That he had failed her. It wasn't until he'd seen her in the live streams, radiating happiness, contentment, and peace, that he realized what she had found. And what he had taken from her all those years. Now, Daniel sat up in his bed, a cold sweat on his brow as the memory continued to plague him. He had never truly understood Annie. Not in the way she had deserved. He had been too wrapped up in his own world, his ambition, his empire, his need for control. But in the silence of their separation he had seen the truth. She had given him everything she had and he had taken it all for granted. Now he would do anything to make it right. He couldn't waste any more time. Daniel dressed quickly, his thoughts racing. He couldn't let this regret define him. He had already lost her once. He wasn't about to lose her again. He needed to see her. And this time he wasn't going to let her go without a fight. Annie was in the kitchen when she heard the sound of the familiar car pulling up to the inn's gate. Her heart skipped. She knew who it was before she even looked outside. It was him. Daniel. She hadn't heard from him in weeks. And after the last conversation she hadn't expected him to come to Willow Inn again. It had taken so much for her to rebuild, to let go of the past. But now here he was. She wiped her hands on her apron, her chest tight as she made her way outside. There was no sense in pretending she wasn't affected. She had known deep down that something had shifted. But seeing him in front of her like this, it hit her like a wave. "Annie," Daniel said, his voice hoarse with urgency. "I need to talk to you." She crossed her arms, raising an eyebrow. "About what, Daniel?" "There's nothing left to talk about." His eyes softened, his gaze pleading. "No, there is. Please. Just listen." She stood still, watching him carefully. She had been through so much to get to where she was now. But something in his eyes, something raw and honest, made her hesitate. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about the day you left. The day you asked for a divorce," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I was too blind to see what I had. What you meant to me. And when you left, I left it all behind. I wasn't ready to love you the way you deserved, and now I have to live with that." Annie's heart thudded in her chest. "I didn't see it then, but I see it now," he continued. "And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Annie. I know I can't undo what I did, but I can make things right. I can learn to love you the way you deserve." She stared at him, the words hanging in the air between them. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You can't just show up and ask for everything back. I've worked so hard to rebuild myself. I don't expect you to give me another chance," he said quickly. "But I will earn it. I will earn your forgiveness. Your trust. I won't stop trying until I make it right. Because I know now that you were always worth fighting for. You were always worth loving. And I failed you." Annie's breath caught in her throat. Part of her wanted to turn away, to walk back inside and close the door on him forever. But another part, one she had buried so deep for so long, wanted to reach out to let him in. She remained silent for a long moment, her eyes meeting his. Finally she spoke. "Maybe you'll earn it, Daniel. But it's going to take time. And it's going to take more than just words." He nodded, his face filled with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'll show you every day that I mean it." And so it began. Daniel didn't ask for forgiveness in an instant. He didn't demand it. Instead, he spent every day proving that his love for her was no longer a distant thought, but something tangible. And as time passed, Annie began to see it. The man who had once been cold and distant was learning to love with all the warmth she had always wanted.